you sucker. Brand new business blaze for you. How much money do Uber drivers actually make? Thank you, Danny, for writing this script. I spent a lot of time riding around in Ubers, or until recently, I spent time riding around in Taxify. I don't know if anyone, do other countries have Taxify? It's like cheap Uber. And it was always a little bit cheaper, so I always rode it. And then the other day I got into a car, there weren't any seatbelts in the bag, the driver wasn't wearing a seatbelt, the car smelled of cigarettes, and also like that smell you get where the petrol's not being properly burned. And I was like sitting in the back of this car, and it's like, I'm gonna get out. I'm actually gonna get out. So yeah, I just like pull over, I'm ending the ride here. So I wrote to Taxify and I was like, this was completely unacceptable. This was not safe. This was not in any way acceptable. Didn't get a reply. Thanks, Taxify. You suck. You know you've changed the world when the name of your app makes it into the Cambridge English Dictionary as a term for revolutionizing an industry. Well, more or less. The official definition for Uberization is to change the market for a service by introducing a different way of buying or using it, especially using mobile technology. And look, I don't mean like, I feel like you've made it as a company when your brand has made it into the pronunciation dictionary I use. So, Uber,
German, Uber.
Uberization. No, sadly not. Uberlandia.
Uberlandia, Brazil.
It's a place in Brazil. Well, didn't all the Nazis go over to Brazil? That sounds like a very German town in Brazil. The new word is obviously derived from Uber, which makes it easier than ever before to hitch a ride home from the pub or get fast food takeaway delivered to your door with just a few quick clicks on your phone instead of having to stand in a queue or undergo the ordeal of a telephone call with another human being. Hi, yeah, I need a taxi. I'm not really sure what time. And he's like, you have to book a taxi ahead of time. It's like, look, I don't know whether I'm gonna have a fifth beer, okay? Whereas with Uber, you could just be like, I want to go home. I've had too many beers. Come here. Over the last few years, Uber has rapidly evolved into a cheaper, quicker, and more convenient alternative to private taxi services. In fact, by 2019, the peer-to-peer ride-hailing app is estimated to have around 110 million users worldwide, a 69% market share in the USA for passenger transport, and a 25% market share for food delivery. That's impressive. And one of the great things about Uber is it just operates in so many countries. Like, I'll often travel somewhere, you get to the airport, and it's like, all right, I want to get to my hotel. And I'm always like, I don't know how much taxis cost. I don't know if they're gonna rip me off because I'm a tourist. But with Uber, you're just like, come here. And you know you're getting a fair price. It just works. And also not having to use cash and then feeling awkward about tipping or not tipping and whether you have to tip or not to tip. Like, I know in the USA, you guys tip for everything. So it's like, if I'm in a cab, I would have no idea. Do I tip in a cab? I don't feel I'd do it in London. Maybe I would, but like £1. In London alone, more than 3.5 million people are choosing Uber to hop around the capital. But what does the view look like from the driver's seat? According to Uber Technologies, the company itself, the view looks pretty peachy. What a surprise. It'd be bad if they were like, yeah, no, Uber, driving for Uber, it's kind of a rip-off. You don't really get paid very much, don't do it. They insist that the app gives drivers the freedom and flexibility to become their own boss and rake in great money with their own car. Now, honestly, I got this article made thinking that they probably weren't raking in great money. Uber claimed in 2016 that drivers could earn up to as much as $90,000 per year signing up to the platform, although this was swiftly followed by a $20 million fine from the US government for grossly exaggerating prospective earnings. So let's just say 90,000 is an unrealistic high end. Say $90,000? Isn't that like £70,000? That is an insane living. More recently, Uber has put together a study which appears to be slightly more grounded in reality and reveals that the average wage of an Uber driver is just under $20 per hour. But bear in mind that this was a study put together by Uber's marketing department. What a surprise! We should really take this figure with a pinch of salt. Well, but is it really possible for a driver to pull in big money from Uber? Well, nobody is accusing Uber of just plucking these latest figures from the air, but they may not necessarily be approaching the matter from the best angle. I really feel like they've plucked this number from the air. Or like, the 90,000 feels plucked from the air. There was probably one dude who threw some mirror, like someone tipped him like $88,000 and he made $2,000 driving and they were like, 90,000 a year. And the guy who tipped him $88,000 was the, what's that Uber guy who got fired? Doesn't matter. Before we go any further, I should make it clear that an Uber driver's personal income will vary wildly depending on their location, the type of vehicle they drive, and the current level of demand in their area. So maybe the guy who made $90,000 a year was like driving a Rolls Royce in Switzerland. Even when just focusing on America, the earnings are up and down and all over the place from city to city. A typical driver from Detroit or Houston will earn significantly less than a typical driver in New York or San Francisco, where higher demand has naturally created higher ride fares. You're also more likely to get a higher income if you've got a big fancy car. For example, the Uber Black and Uber SUV services are the high-end option for customers if you need a VIP ride, and you're going to pull in a much higher ride fare every time if you've got the right set of wheels. That's true, like Uber Black's a lot more expensive. I feel if I was Ubering somewhere, it'd be like twice as much to go by Uber Black. I guess they take more money from you though. It seems like a much better deal. And like big modern cars, they don't use a lot of petrol compared to like small cars these days. There's not a big difference. However, as the overwhelming majority of consumers are just looking for a quick hop from A to B without the need to impress passers-by, they tend to go for the UberX service, which is the cheapest and most practical curb-to-curb service in a standard car. Yeah, the only time I ever take Uber Black is when someone else has called it Uber Black. I'm not sure, I don't think I've ever called one myself. The dynamic pricing structure of Uber fares, or surge pricing, adds another variable to the formula. During times of high demand, when there are not enough drivers in particularly busy areas, the ride fares quoted to a customer will temporarily increase until demand has subsided to more natural levels. This is something I absolutely love. It's such a beautiful expression of supply and demand in action. Very cool. From the perspective of a customer living in a kind of area that's regularly hit by surge pricing, it can mean that getting a quote from Uber is a bit like pulling the lever of a fruit machine and hoping for a good result. It's true, and like often if I get like surge pricing and it's like, it's a bit more expensive, and I'm not in a rush, I'll just cancel it and then I'll call it again in 5 minutes, and often it's cheaper. But surge pricing also means that pickup is always available quickly and reliably even during the busiest periods if you're willing to pay for it. The shrewdest drivers will be compelled to go the extra mile and pick up the higher fares of the zones which are currently surging on their map display. So the basic formula for the cost of a typical Uber ride goes something like this. I thought this was going to be a really simple question. It's like, oh yeah, well there's lots of kind of information slash marketing from Uber and then all of these variables. There is a base fee or booking fare before the wheels even start spinning. These are usually quite small. Let's not forget that Uber works on the principle that rides are cheaper than your average taxi service, but they will vary depending on where you live and the type of service you've requested. Yeah, I have not taken a taxi in years because it's a worse experience, it's more expensive. Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a worse experience, it's more expensive. You know, there's that saying in like economics or business or whatever, you can have it fast, you can have it good, you can have it cheap. Pick two. You can't have three. You can't. And Uber's like, it's fast, it's cheap, and it's good. Whereas taxis, I feel, they're not fast, they're not cheap, they're not good. They fail on all three. Then there's the potential for surge pricing to take into account. This essentially works as a multiplier, and the value will depend on the gap between customer demand and driver supply. The wider the gap, the higher the multiplier. Finally, when the rider gets in the car, they start to rack up the bill for time and distance, so the fare will increase for every minute and every mile that gets accrued during their journey. However, the driver obviously doesn't end up with all of that money. Uber take their cut, which is 20% for the basic UberX service. Their cut increases to 25% for Uber Black and 28% for Uber SUV. Wow, I think Uber SUV or Uber Black, that's definitely a better deal, because if it's twice as much, especially for Uber SUV, because an SUV doesn't have to be a much nicer car, it doesn't have to be a ton more expensive than, you know, the cheaper cars that you'd get on UberX. So I'd get an SUV and I would drive that. So now let's go back to those figures quoted by Uber on the average earnings of a driver. To be painstakingly precise, Uber reckon that the average income earned by one of their drivers in the US is $19.35 per hour. That's actually pretty super reasonable. Like if I was left over $19.35 an hour, that's way above the minimum wage. This sounds pretty good to me, especially as Simon pays me only $2 per script that I write, and they usually take a week. It's absolutely true. You might be expecting me to say at this point that Uber are trying to pull the wool over our eyes but not deducting their cut from this final figure. But no, to be completely fair, they've arrived at this figure after including the average customer tip and taking away the hefty cut. Yeah, that's what I would expect. If you tell me this is how much I'm going to make per hour, that's how much I want to make per hour. Not like, oh yeah, well, after we take away our cut and all of this shit. But there are just a couple of problems with it. Firstly, it doesn't include any expenses incurred by the driver. Well, okay, hang on, because these are pretty huge. You're driving around, so you got to have a car. There's the cost of buying the car or loan on the car, depreciation, petrol. Danny's going to cover this, I'm sure, so let's just get into it. And these can stack up pretty quickly. Again, expenses vary depending on your vehicle and location, but at the minimum, they're going to include essentials such as fuel, insurance, tolls, and vehicle maintenance. I actually think tolls are covered in the Uber app. Like when I go to the airport and they have the parking, I always get charged extra for the parking. In fact, a low-end estimate would would be that the typical driver incurs around $5 of expenses per hour. Another key factor is that Uber worked out the average income rather than the median income, which is how most respected statisticians would measure the results for a clearer picture. Honestly, never been really sure what's the difference between average and median. If anyone wants to enlighten me, or maybe Daddy's going to enlighten me. An average measuring includes all the outliers, or a small group of people earning significantly higher or lower than the rest of the group, which can seriously skew the final results. In this case, it includes a tiny minority of drivers with fancy cars who earn much more money from the higher-end Uber services, and this unnaturally pushes up the average figure to way beyond anything that would be recognized by a typical Uber driver. The Ridester website, a hugely popular online resource for rideshare drivers, recently conducted their own independent survey with thousands of Uber drivers. This revealed the median income, which disregards any distorting figures from a minority, and came out with a final figure of $14.73 per hour, which is still not bad. I feel like that's not awful. $14.73? It's still definitely above minimum wage. Hey Siri, what's the minimum wage in the UK?
The National Minimum Wage Act 1998 creates a minimum wage across the United Kingdom. Would you like to hear more?
Well, no, because you didn't answer my question.
There's nothing to read.
You, Siri. Because it's like £8 an hour, which is like $10. So it is above the minimum wage, but not much. But this doesn't deduct the expenses incurred by the driver that we calculated at $5 per hour. Oh, okay, so now we're getting hit. So the realistic final average by an Uber driver in the United States is around $9.73 per hour, which is obviously less than half the figure heavily promoted by Uber, and quite some way below the $90,000 per year that they tried to fob us off with a few years back. You want to see something crazy? I think we can't even get to $90,000. Let's do $9.73. And let's say our Uber driver manages to drive for 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, times 52 weeks a year. Yeah, so if our Uber driver is driving 365 days a year for 20 hours a day, non-stop, he's making $70,834 a year. So not exactly 90,000, is it, Uber? Of course, every driver has a different story. I'm sure there really are Uber drivers out there who are pulling in a healthy income by traveling the distance or taking advantage of surging zones, working through terrible weather conditions when other drivers would rather give it a miss, and working through the weekends or even the very early hours of the morning. It will also help a lot if you've got a big posh car, which can get you signed up to one of those luxury services. But I'm also sure there are drivers who would struggle to make a living wage solely from Uber. About 50% of the Ridester survey participants reported that they drive in addition to doing other work, which seems to indicate that Uber is widely considered to be a way of earning money on the side rather than a full-time job. When the survey participants were asked to rate their satisfaction with Uber Pay out of 5 stars, 70% of them responded with a distinctly average 3 stars, while only 9% felt compelled toward the full 5 stars. So next time you're hitching a ride with an Uber driver and you're feeling in a generous mood, more likely this is on the way back home from the pub rather than on the way there, maybe consider digging a little deeper in your pockets for that tip. Well, this was a nice one. I guess I shouldn't pack this whole YouTube thing in and go work for Uber just yet, but you know, if I'm in a pinch, it doesn't sound too bad. And I like driving. Like, I wouldn't mind driving around, like picking people up, dropping them off. Did you guys ever play GTA back in the day where you could do the taxi missions? I used to like that. You drive around, you pick someone up, you drop them off, you make some money. It's kind of fun. This has been Business Blaze. Suggestions, as ever, please put them in the comments below this video. And also, please do smash that like button if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to this channel. It's pretty new. And thank you for watching.